I remember that night vividly. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white against the black leather. The rain battered the windshield, the wipers barely keeping up. I had driven this stretch of highway hundreds of times before, but tonight it felt different. The darkness seemed thicker, more oppressive, as if the night itself was alive and watching me. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 11:47 p.m. Too late for me to be out, but I had stayed late at the office finishing up a project, and now I just wanted to get home. The road was deserted, not a single car in sight, just me and the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead. The rain intensified, a torrential downpour that turned the road into a slick, treacherous path. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield, trying to make out the lines on the road. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees that lined the highway, their branches swaying violently in the wind. As I rounded a bend, my headlights caught something in the road. I slammed on the brakes, tires skidding on the wet pavement. The car came to a stop just inches from a figure standing in the middle of the road. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the figure, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a woman, drenched from head to toe, her clothes clinging to her body. She stood motionless, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I rolled down the window a crack, rain instantly blowing into the car. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, just continued to stare at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was very wrong. I debated whether to get out and help her or to drive away. The latter seemed heartless, but there was an inexplicable dread that kept me rooted to my seat. Suddenly she moved, walking slowly towards the passenger side of the car. My heart raced as she reached for the door handle. I locked the doors instinctively. She stopped, her hand hovering over the handle, her eyes still fixed on me. Then, without warning, she turned and walked off into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. What the hell was that? I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of fear. I couldn't sit here all night. Taking a deep breath, I started the car again and continued down the road, my eyes darting nervously to the rearview mirror. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and the road seemed to stretch on forever. I tried to calm myself, but every shadow, every movement on the side of the road made my heart skip a beat. I turned on the radio, hoping for some distraction, but it was just static. I flipped through the stations, but there was nothing but white noise. Frustrated, I turned it off. My phone buzzed in the cup holder and I glanced down. It was a text from my wife, wondering when I would be home. I quickly typed out a response, telling her I was on my way and should be home soon. As I put the phone down, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. In the rearview mirror, there was a figure in the back seat. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. My heart pounded in my ears as I faced forward again, my hands trembling on the wheel. I had to be imagining things. The night, the rain, the strange woman, all of it was playing tricks on my mind, but the feeling of being watched persisted. I glanced in the mirror again, and this time, I saw her clearly. The woman from the road sitting in the back seat, her eyes boring into mine. I gasped, swerving the car slightly. When I looked back, she was gone. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. "It's just your imagination." But the fear was real, a suffocating presence that filled the car. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to her. Who was she? What did she want? I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still with me, watching, waiting. The road seemed endless, the rain relentless. My eyes were heavy, the stress and exhaustion taking their toll. I fought to keep them open, but the darkness was so inviting. Just a quick rest, I thought. Just to close my eyes for a second. A loud bang jolted me awake. The car swerved violently, and I struggled to regain control. I managed to pull over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I stepped out into the rain, the cold drops stinging my skin. The front tire was blown, a large piece of metal embedded in the rubber. I cursed under my breath, kicking the tire in frustration. I was miles from the nearest town, and there was no way I could change the tire in this weather. I got back into the car, pulling out my phone to call for help. No signal, of course. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, closing my eyes. I would just have to wait for someone to come by. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, there was a tapping on the window. Yow. I opened my eyes to see a man standing outside, his face obscured by the rain. "Need some help?" he called out. I hesitated, then nodded, unlocking the door. He opened it and leaned in, his eyes scanning the inside of the car. "Tire blew out," I explained. "I don't have a signal to call for help." He nodded, glancing at the back seat. "You alone out here?" I followed his gaze, but there was no one there. I nodded. "Yeah, just me." He looked back at me, his eyes narrowing. "You sure about that?" A chill ran down my spine. "Yes, I'm sure." He stared at me for a moment longer, then shrugged. "All right, let's get that tire changed." I got out and followed him to the trunk, pulling out the spare and the jack. We worked in silence, the rain soaking us to the bone. As we finished, he glanced at me again, his expression unreadable. "Be careful out here," he said finally. "You never know what you might run into." I nodded, thanking him as he got back into his truck and drove off. I watched his taillights disappear into the night, then got back into my car. I started the engine, the feeling of unease still gnawing at me. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. She was there, sitting in the back seat, her eyes locked onto mine.